Do you want to be ahead of the game for the latest in arts, music, cuisine, and entertainment across the Middle East's most dynamic capital cities? Al Monitor is proud to launch our City Pulse newsletters, focused exclusively on local news, starting in Riyadh, Dubai, Istanbul, and Doha. Each week, our on-the-ground writers in these cities cover the latest cultural happenings and trends, so you have everything you need to know for the best local experiences. To subscribe for free, go to almonitor.com, that's al-monitor.com, and sign up on our newsletter page.
Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed on Tuesday that Iran will hold talks with the U.S. and Oman on Saturday to discuss the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, saying the negotiations would be indirect. U.S. President Donald Trump had announced the talks on Monday during a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying the talks would be direct and that Iran would be in, quote, great danger should the negotiations not succeed. Trump has been calling for Iran to negotiate on their nuclear program since he returned to office in January. He sent a letter in this vein to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in March. Trump has also repeatedly threatened to bomb Iran if they don't agree to a new nuclear deal, and in February reinstituted his maximum pressure strategy of sanctions on Iran. The U.S. accuses Iran of seeking a nuclear weapon with its nuclear energy program, a charge Iran denies. Araghchi told reporters during a trip to Algeria on Tuesday that whether the talks are direct or indirect is not the key issue, saying what is important is that the parties demonstrate, quote, seriousness. Araghchi and Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who previously worked on the Gaza ceasefire, will lead their respective sides in Oman, but a lot remains unknown on the process and whether the talks will actually lead anywhere. My guest this week is Al Monitor's State Department correspondent, Elizabeth Hagedorn. Elizabeth takes us through the lead-up to Iran and the U.S. agreeing to the talks, the issues between the two sides, and what may come of the meeting in Oman. Hope you enjoy. Elizabeth, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining on this busy news day. Elizabeth, my first question is, how did we get here? What led to Iran agreeing to these talks in Oman?
Well, Iran has been signaling both publicly and via intermediaries that it's willing to engage in indirect talks with the United States. And for his part, Trump made no secret on the campaign trail that he desired a new nuclear agreement to replace the one he ripped up in 2018. Since taking office in January, Trump has repeatedly threatened military action to prevent Iran from building a bomb, but he's also made it pretty clear that he prefers a diplomatic deal to curb Iran's nuclear activity. And as for the Iranians, I think they've likely assessed that Trump genuinely wants a deal and is prepared to grant major sanctions relief to achieve it. But the two sides remain deeply divided on the compromises they're willing to make.
And what do we know about the structure of the talks? Trump said they will be direct. Araghchi didn't exactly say that. Will they be indirect or indirect? What do we know there?
It's a good question, Adam. President Trump told reporters yesterday that Saturday's talks in Oman would be direct, whereas the Iranians are calling them indirect. If the two sides were to meet face-to-face, it would be significant. The Iranians refused to hold direct negotiations with the Biden administration, as well as during the first Trump term, not since the original nuclear negotiations under former President Barack Obama have senior U.S. officials sat across from their Iranian counterparts at the negotiating table. I will say it's notable that Iran is sending its top diplomat, Foreign Minister Araghchi, to Saturday's negotiations. He was Iran's former chief nuclear negotiator and is about as high level as you can get in Iran. Washington will be represented by Trump's trusted Middle East envoy turned go-to negotiator, Steve Witkoff, again, very high level. I've seen some analysts speculate that Iran would not send an official as high level as Araghchi if this weren't likely to end in direct talks.
And looking ahead, what are some of the possible outcomes of the negotiations on Saturday?
It's not entirely clear what kind of deal the Trump administration is seeking from the negotiations. Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, has said the administration wants full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program. He's talked about an arrangement similar to the one in which Libya completely shut down its nuclear program in 2003. You heard yesterday in the Oval Office, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also referenced the so-called Libya model. On the other hand, Steve Witkoff, who is leading the negotiations, has suggested the administration is seeking a less ambitious, perhaps more achievable deal. He's called for a verification program to ensure that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons. The original nuclear deal, known as the JCPOA, set up a verification program that monitored and imposed restrictions on Iran's nuclear enrichment. Asked yesterday how a new deal would be more effective than the Obama-era JCPOA, Trump offered no specifics. He said only it would be, quote, different and maybe a lot stronger.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Elizabeth Hagedorn after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Okay, we're back. Elizabeth, the last question is also about what's next. Do you think there's a time frame in which the U.S. wants to get this done? And what about Iran's timing?
If Iran and the US are serious about a deal, both sides need to move quickly. That's because of a ticking time bomb at the United Nations. The option for Europe to restore UN sanctions that were lifted on Iran under the original nuclear deal expires in October. And because of the time required for that so-called snapback process to play out, the real deadline for them to do this, them being France, Britain, and Germany, is months sooner. They're the remaining European signatories to the deal, and unlike the United States, retain the ability to invoke snapback on Iran. Iran has vowed to respond to that snapback measure if it's invoked by pulling out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, known as the NPT. So for these reasons, the Trump administration presumably wants to get a deal done by early this summer. But given the history of US-Iran talks, we know that these sort of diplomatic breakthroughs tend not to happen overnight.
Elizabeth, thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to more of your reporting on this story from Washington.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.